bring to a point of focus all of the fragmentation and divisiveness of our lives. We ask thee to draw upon thy long experience with thy children, and out of this special wisdom and understanding to interpret the words which we say to thee in our prayer. We are overwhelmed by our great inability somehow to manage the imperfections of life. The imperfections of our own private lives. The clear insight which suddenly becomes dim and often disappears at the moment when we were sure that we could act upon it. And we don't know how to assess this. The good deed which we express and which, as it leaves us, wings on its way to fulfill itself in another's life, in another's need. And as we watch, we are horrified at the way in which something goes wrong. And the good deed is not a good deed in the way that it works. And we are thrown back upon ourselves. We don't know how to manage the imperfections of our own lives. The imperfections of so many expressions of our lives. We have brooded over nature, and we have understood here and there some of its inner mandates, and we have been able to translate these mandates into expressions of machinery and objects, and we have learned how to operate these machines and to make these objects created out of our insights, expressions of our intent. We've made these things into servants to obey our minds and our wills. And then suddenly we are faced with radical and quick and devastating breakdowns. And before the horrified eyes of the world, 95 people who were full of life and hope, riding on their dreams into the future, comfortable in one of these expressions that we have created out of our understanding of nature. Something goes wrong, we do not know what. And there's death and destruction. We don't know how to manage the imperfections of our lives. And now we are waiting for a fateful moment when once again we ourselves as a nation will begin learning how, with more finesse and accuracy, to kill, to destroy. And we feel, some of us, that the only way by which we can survive is to do this. And some are sure that this is but to hasten the end of the age. How to manage the imperfections of our minds and our spirits, our thoughts, even our intents. Oh God, we don't know how. We don't know how. We don't know how. Take all the cry of our anguish, all the sin and brokenness of our faltering selves, and hold them with such sureness that we may learn of Thee. Drop Thy still dews of quietness till all our striving cease. Take from our souls the strain and stress, and let our ordered lives confess the beauty of Thy peace, Thy peace. The quest for truth two rather short paragraphs from Tolstoy. For the old outlived public opinion to make way for that which is new and living, it is necessary that men who recognize the new requirements of life should speak of them openly. Yet the men who recognize these new requirements, one for the sake of one thing, another for the sake of something else, not merely refrain from speaking openly of them, but in word and deed maintain what is in direct opposition to these requirements. Only the truth and the free expression of it can establish that new public opinion which will change the out-of-date and pernicious order of life. And yet, far from freely speaking the truth, we know we often even directly state what we regard as faults. If only free men would not rely on that which has not strength and is never free, an external power, but would believe in what is always powerful and free, in truth and the expression of it. If only men would boldly and clearly speak out the truth that has already been revealed to them, of the brotherhood of all nations, for instance, and the criminality of exclusive devotion to one's own nation, the dead false public opinion upon which all the power of government and all the evil produced by them rests, would drop off of itself like dried skin and make way for the new living public opinion which only waits that dropping off of the old husk that has confined it in order to assert its claim openly and with authority and to establish new forms of life that are in harmony with the conscience of men. In the few minutes that are left, I want to establish the line along which my own thinking moves with regard to this particular aspect of our quest. The quest for truth, in a sense, may be regarded as the essence of all the quests. But in a very particular sense, I'm thinking of a man's experience of truth as being something more than what he is able to understand at a particular moment in time, understand with his mind. And thinking of the mind now in terms of formal thought, formal intellection, thinking of the mind as the vehicle for reflective thinking. There is a sense, of course, in which a man who understands something with his mind is sure that this is his understanding of the truth. Always, you see, man's understanding is fragmentary. It is always limited by the ends which he is seeking. It is limited by the conditions of his search. It is limited by how he interprets the significance of the particular moment in which he is living and how he himself relates to that moment as a person. But the experience of truth, the fragmentary fulfillment of the quest, seems to obtain when a man's personal sense of reality, and in thinking about this, I tried to find a way to talk about it without using the word reality, but I don't know how to do it in any other way. Now to go back. His personal sense of reality, when this personal sense of reality seems in a moment or in a particular relationship or experience to become a part of an enlarging reality. This is to experience truth. Now let me say that again. When his personal sense of reality seems to him to become a part of an enlarging sense of reality, he experiences truth. And this is more than what happens to the mind. And I want to illustrate this in three ways, and that will be all that I'll have time to do, even if time for that. The first is taken from Tolstoy. Tolstoy was interested in, as an idea of the mind now, he was interested in the illogic and the immorality of corporal punishment. He felt that the state did not have the right to take human life even though it was acting on behalf of established law and established practice. But and out of much of his writing about this, he dealt in terms of logic. He made the case for it. And then one day when he was visiting in Paris, and he stood in the public square, and he saw a man being beheaded by the guillotine, and as the man's head was severed from its body and it fell into the wicker basket, now, Tolstoy says, that I knew at a level far deeper than reflective thought that this kind of behavior was evil. When my personal reality becomes a part of an enlarging reality, which gives to me at my root a sense of being a part of this enlarging reality. This is the experience of truth. Another illustration. Last Tuesday afternoon when I was in Atlanta, Georgia, I talked with a 18-year-old girl who had become, as a freshman, involved in the first group of sit-in persons who were making a mass attack on the lunch counters, and as she talked to me about herself and about what she had been doing, and she tried to assess what had been going on in her as a person, she had this to say and gave this illustration. She said, I entered into this movement, as she called it, entered into this student movement as a freshman. And it was an idea that appealed to me, and I related to it in terms of the kind of sense that it made to my mind. And I was a part of all of the planning and the details of the campaign, and was in all of this, and it had a certain kind of reality for me. But she said it did not become truth for me until standing in the Walgreens, thank you. Standing at the Walgreens counter when all of the counters had been closed because of this disturbance. And then down near the end, I noticed, she said, out of the corner of my eye, that some people were being let in at a certain point so that they could get to the seats before we could get over and occupy any. And I moved from where I was and went around there to stand in the gate, as it were. And the man came up to me in plain clothes, and he said, if you do not move, I will arrest you. And I said, let me see your badge. And she said, this was a part of the logic. And he opened his coat and flashed his badge, and she said, oh, but that's not a Fulton County badge. And you have no jurisdiction over me, so I'm not going to move, she said. And whereupon he took her by the arm, and she said his fingernails were rather long, and as I turned my arm, they dug into my arm, and there was a little blood, and then he swung me around, and I fell over against the counter, and when my back hit the counter, with all of me now, saw and felt the truth of what I was doing. It had nothing to do with the possibility even of social change. It had nothing to do with anything other than the deep inner something in me now became a part of an enlarged meaning. And what I had been thinking with my mind, now I experience. No one other. In 1935, when it was my privilege, along with Mrs. Thurman and one other person, to sit down and have about a 4-hour conversation with Mahatma Ghandi. And all the time had been spent with his asking many, many questions about America, about American education, about Negro education,
about religion, about the church, all kinds of things. And then suddenly it seems as if all the time was gone and we had to go back to get our train, and then he said, maybe you'd like to ask each one of you one question, since I've taken all the time asking all the questions. And one question that was asked him was this: why did your movement fail of its objective, namely to bring freedom to the Indian nation, freedom from the British? And he said, always my one and my sole aim has been the quest for truth, and to act on the truth that I sense and feel and see. And it came to me that a creative, ethical ideal such as ahimsa could not be supported by people who merely saw it as an idea or merely as a technique, because it had to be totally supported, and this required a kind of vitality. And when the vitality was not available, then the ideal itself began to splinter, and all forms of violences broke out. So, he said, I felt that I needed to withdraw then from the political arena and devote my mind and the totality of my resources to addressing all of my energies on behalf of truth to the question of the vitality of the masses of the people. And the first thing I discovered in doing this was that the masses of the people did not have the kind of vitality that would enable them to become totally involved in this kind of ethical commitment, because they were hungry. And then he talked about, statistically, about the food and the hunger and so forth. So he felt that I must do something about that, and this, he said, is why the resurrection of the spinning wheel. If I could put within the reach of the simplest villager a little vehicle by means of which he could establish even a temporary and limited windbreak behind which there would be some leisure and some time and some ability to get a little more food to eat, so that he would not have to contemplate the fact that all of his life he might live until his death without ever one time, in all the sweep of his years, have the satisfaction of a full stomach, just once before he died. And then the second thing that I discovered was that there was a relationship between this lack of vitality and what he called a sense of self-respect, a sense, how to say this, a sense of being a person, being whole in one's own sight. And he said, this sense of self-respect, and then he looked at me, and you know how someone is talking to you and suddenly they see what you're thinking and catch you red-handed? Well, this is what he did. He said, their loss of self-respect was not due to what you're thinking, he said. I said, how do you know what I'm thinking? Well, he said, you were thinking that the loss of self-respect was due to the fact that they had been conquered by the British, and the British were here. And then I broke out into a typical laugh, because he did catch me. That's what I was thinking. He said, oh, no, not that. But he said the laws of self-respect, because of the presence of untouchability in Hinduism. For he said, if you were talking about something in Christianity that was negative, you would say that this had grown up as something on the outside of Christianity. But when Christians are talking about untouchability in Hinduism, they say this is germane to the genius of Hinduism. But it isn't, he said. I felt that we would have to purge ourselves of this, because this untouchability dammed up all of the, as it were, the spiritual juices of the person, so they could not flow and purify and make new and charge with energy and impetus and insight and courage and wisdom. So I did two things about it. The first thing I did was to adopt an untouchable child into my family. And I'm a caste Hindu. And when I adopted this untouchable child in my family, this announced to all caste Hindus, this is what I mean by the truth that I'm talking. And the second thing that I did, he said, was to change the name. And here was one of the great strokes of spiritual genius. To change the name from untouchables, from Sudras, from outcasts, to Harijins. And the word Harijin means child of God. Now, he said, if I felt that if I could make all caste Hindus, every time they referred, thought, felt an untouchable, they would not think of him as an outcast or as an untouchable, but think of him as a child of God. There would come a time when this would create the kind of inner moral chaos that could not be resolved until there was a revolution in the private and personal attitude towards the untouchable. And when these things began to work in me, he said, the meaning of the doctrine became total. And I felt that the personal loyalty that I had been experiencing all along to truth, to God, became one now with an enlarging sense of truth and God. The quest for truth is fulfilled even in its most insignificant dimension, when the little personal reality of which I am totally aware becomes a part of an enlarging reality, so that the root in me suddenly becomes the root in existence. Therefore, the Master says, you shall experience the truth, and the truth will make you free. Once again, our Father, we have not done it.
but we have tried to lay bare before thee the most honest stirring of the mind and the heart. Thou wilt not despise the fruits of our offering. O God, God,